The microphone was hidden in the ceiling. The Wehrmacht general thought he was safe. It was 1945. The war was over. He was a prisoner, but he believed his conversations were private. What he said next would have gotten him executed if Hitler had still been alive. The SS are going to destroy us all. They're not soldiers, they're Hitler's attack dogs, and we're the ones cleaning up their mess. But he wasn't finished. His voice dropped to a whisper. I've spent 6 years watching these black uniformed fanatics tear apart everything we built. 6 years of watching real soldiers die because of their madness. If I'm being honest, I hated them more than I ever hated the enemy. The British were recording everything. This wasn't just military rivalry. This was hatred so deep, it would tear Nazi Germany apart from within. Wehrmacht officers plotting against the SS. Secret orders ignored. Supplies sabotaged. Brothers in arms becoming mortal enemies. What you're about to hear took me 3 years to piece together from classified files, secret recordings, and testimonies that were buried for 80 years. Stories of Wehrmacht generals who tried to arrest SS leaders. Of German soldiers who chose to fight alongside Americans rather than serve with the SS. Of a civil war that almost erupted in the middle of World War II. This is the story they never wanted you to know. The story of how Hitler's own forces came to despise each other more than any foreign enemy. November 8th, 1938. The Reich Chancellery in Berlin. Hitler was throwing a dinner party. Not just any dinner party, this was supposed to be a celebration of German military unity. Wehrmacht generals in their traditional grey uniforms sat across from SS leaders in their black dress uniforms. It was the first time these two forces had formally met as equals. The tension was immediate, visible, electric. General Ludwig Beck, chief of the German General Staff, later wrote in his private diary, "The moment I shook hands with Himmler, I knew we were looking at our future enemies." Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer of the SS, sat at Hitler's right hand. His pale, calculating eyes surveyed the room full of Prussian officers with barely concealed contempt. These men represented everything he despised: old traditions, aristocratic bloodlines, loyalty to institutions rather than ideology. The Wehrmacht officers weren't impressed either. They saw political appointees playing soldier. Colonel General Franz Halder whispered to the officer beside him, "Look at them. They wear our uniforms, but they've never heard a shot fired in anger." Then came the moment that changed everything. During the main course, talk turned to military tradition. General Wilhelm Keitel mentioned the Wehrmacht's proud lineage, stretching back to Frederick the Great. The Prussian officer corps, centuries of military excellence. Himmler set down his fork. The room went quiet. "Your tradition is holding Germany back," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We are the future. The SS represents the new Germany, racially pure, ideologically committed, absolutely loyal to the Führer." The Wehrmacht officers stared in stunned silence. No one had ever spoken to them like this. These were men who had served the German state for decades. Their families had bled for Germany in countless wars. Then Erwin Rommel spoke up. At 37, he was younger than most generals in the room, but his reputation was already legendary. He'd earned his Pour le Mérite, Germany's highest military honor, in the trenches of World War I. When he looked at Himmler, there was no respect in his eyes. "You're politicians in costume," Rommel said quietly. "Playing soldier while real soldiers do the fighting." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Himmler's face flushed red. His hand moved instinctively toward where his sidearm would be. For a moment, it looked like violence might erupt right there in Hitler's dining room. Hitler himself had to intervene. He laughed nervously and changed the subject to hunting. But the damage was done. After dinner, as the officers filed out, General Heinz Guderian pulled aside his old friend, General Erich von Manstein. In a conversation recorded by Allied intelligence after the war, Manstein remembered Guderian's exact words. "Mark my words, Erich. Before this war ends, we'll be shooting at each other." Von Manstein tried to laugh it off. "Don't be ridiculous, Heinz. We're all Germans here." Guderian shook his head. "No, we're Germans. There's something else, entirely." Within days, the fallout began. Himmler sent a private memo to Hitler complaining about Wehrmacht insubordination. He demanded that SS officers be given equal rank and authority in all military matters. The Wehrmacht, he wrote, was infected with outdated thinking that threatened Nazi ideology. The Wehrmacht leadership fired back through their own channels. General Beck wrote directly to Hitler, warning that the SS was attempting to create a state within a state. Military efficiency, he argued, required clear chains of command, not competing ideologies. But Hitler saw opportunity in this conflict. Divide and conquer. Let them compete for his favor. Let them check each other's power. What he didn't realize was that he was creating something far more dangerous. He was turning his own military into enemies. Within weeks of that dinner party, Wehrmacht officers were already planning ways to limit SS influence. Secret meetings in private homes. Coded discussions about the problem. They began referring to the SS as the party soldiers, and not as a compliment. The SS responded by recruiting more aggressively from Wehrmacht ranks. They offered better pay, faster promotions, and most importantly, access to Hitler's inner circle. Young Wehrmacht officers found themselves forced to choose sides. Captain Klaus von Stauffenberg, who would later lead the plot to assassinate Hitler, wrote to his wife after the dinner party, "The SS represents everything wrong with our new Germany. They've turned military service into political theater." But perhaps the most prophetic words came from General Beck himself. In his final diary entry, before resigning in protest, he wrote, "November 8th, 1938 will be remembered as the night German military unity died. What Hitler has created is not an army, it's two armies. And two armies cannot serve the same master." He was right. That dinner party didn't create military unity. It created a civil war, waiting to happen. And the first shots were about to be fired. The recruitment film flickered on the screen in the Wehrmacht barracks. It was 1939, and every Wehrmacht unit was required to watch the SS propaganda reels. Sergeant Hans Müller sat in the back row, watching his men's faces as images of perfect SS recruits marched across the screen. Tall, blonde, sculpted like Greek gods. The narrator's voice boomed about racial purity and the new German warrior. Müller's veteran soldiers started laughing, not politely, openly mocking. "Look at these circus performers," one corporal whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. 6 feet tall, blonde hair, can't tell a rifle from a broomstick. But Müller wasn't laughing. He was furious, because he knew what was coming next. The next morning, SS recruitment officers arrived at his base. They had orders, direct from Heinrich Himmler himself. The SS needed recruits, and they were going to take the best from Wehrmacht units, whether the Wehrmacht liked it or not. The criteria were specific. Height, minimum 5 feet 9 inches. Hair, blonde preferred. Eyes, blue if possible. Build, athletic. And most importantly, they had to prove Aryan ancestry back to 1870. Müller watched in helpless rage as they selected 12 of his best soldiers. Not his best fighters, his tallest, most Nordic-looking men. These weren't necessarily his most experienced soldiers or his most skilled marksmen. They were chosen because they looked like Nazi propaganda posters. His best machine gunner, a short, dark-haired veteran of 3 campaigns, was passed over for a tall kid who'd never seen combat. His most reliable radio operator was rejected because his grandmother was Czech. After the SS officers left with their new recruits, Müller exploded to his remaining men. "They took my best men because they were tall and looked Nordic. Left me with the short guys and the old guys. Then they wondered why we resented them." This scene was playing out across Germany. Wehrmacht commanders were losing their most photogenic soldiers to SS units that prioritized appearance over ability. The humiliation was intentional. Colonel Franz Riedweg later testified to Allied interrogators about the recruitment wars. "The SS would arrive at our bases like they were shopping for models. They measured skulls, checked eye color, examined teeth. I felt like I was running a cattle auction, not a military unit." But the Wehrmacht fought back in their own way. They began hiding their best-looking recruits during SS inspections, sending them on training exercises when recruitment officers visited. Some commanders deliberately assigned their most attractive soldiers to distant outposts. The SS caught on quickly. They started demanding complete unit rosters and conducting surprise inspections. Wehrmacht officers who obstructed SS recruitment faced disciplinary action, and sometimes worse. The competition became vicious. SS recruitment officers would promise Wehrmacht soldiers immediate promotions, better pay, and access to the latest equipment if they transferred. They painted the Wehrmacht as old-fashioned, hidebound, stuck in the past. The SS, they claimed, was the future of German military power. Some soldiers believed it. The allure of better uniforms, higher status, and political connections was strong. But others saw through the propaganda. Private Wilhelm Fischer was one of the soldiers recruited from Muller's unit. Years later, he described his experience in Allied prison camps. They made us feel special at first, called us the racial elite of Germany. But when the shooting started, being tall and blonde didn't stop Russian bullets. The Wehrmacht veterans we'd left behind, they were still alive because they knew how to fight, not how to pose. The Wehrmacht's resentment grew deeper with every recruitment raid. They began referring to SS soldiers as Himmler's pretty boys or parade ground warriors. Officers passed around jokes about SS soldiers who needed mirrors to practice their goose step. But it wasn't just about losing personnel. It was about losing respect. Wehrmacht commanders had spent years building elite units based on skill, experience, and battlefield performance. Now they watched as the SS created elite units based on hair color and height measurements. It felt like a mockery of everything the military stood for. General Paul Hauser, who later commanded SS units, admitted in post-war interviews that the recruitment methods created lasting animosity. We were told to build a racial elite, but what we actually built was resentment. Every Wehrmacht soldier we recruited was a personal insult to their former commanders. We weren't just taking their men, we were telling them their standards didn't matter. The situation reached a breaking point in October 1939. SS recruiters arrived at the barracks of the Wehrmacht's elite Alpine Corps, mountain specialists with years of specialized training. They announced they were forming an SS mountain division and needed experienced climbers. The Wehrmacht commander, Colonel Georg Ritter, refused to cooperate. He locked down his base and told the SS officers to get authorization from Wehrmacht High Command. When they threatened him with arrest, he reportedly said, "Go ahead. Arrest a man who's bled for Germany while you were playing politics. See how that looks in the newspapers." The SS backed down that day, but they filed reports with Himmler claiming Wehrmacht sabotage of SS recruitment efforts. The war between the services was escalating from competition to outright hostility. And it was about to get much worse. Because when the real war started, the recruitment disputes would pale in comparison to what happened when these two forces tried to fight together. The pretty boys were about to meet ugly reality. North Africa, 1941. The Desert War was in full swing, and Erwin Rommel had just been promoted to command the Afrika Korps. Hitler was worried. Not about the British, about keeping his favorite general alive. So he made a decision that would create the first open warfare between Wehrmacht and SS command structures. The order came directly from the Führer's headquarters. Rommel would be assigned an SS protection detail. Elite SS guards would handle his personal security. It seemed reasonable. Protect Germany's most successful general. Rommel's response was immediate and explosive. "I don't want those political soldiers anywhere near my men." His aide-de-camp, Captain Aldinger, later recorded the exact conversation in his wartime diary. when Wehrmacht liaison officers suggested that refusing Hitler's protection might be seen as insubordination, Rommel's face turned red with anger. "I've been protecting myself since 1914. I don't need politicians in black uniforms to hold my hand now." But it went deeper than personal pride. Rommel understood what SS presence in his command would mean. Divided loyalty, political oversight, someone watching his every move and reporting back to Heinrich Himmler. He'd watched it happen to other commanders, SS liaisons, who gradually took over operational decisions. Military objectives sacrificed for political goals. He wouldn't let it happen to the Afrika Korps. So Rommel did something unprecedented. He went around Wehrmacht High Command and appealed directly to Hitler. In a personal letter marked "Führer Eyes Only," he wrote, "My Führer, the Afrika Korps fights as one family. We share the same dangers, the same hardships, the same victories. To introduce outside elements would destroy the unity that makes us effective. I request permission to handle my own security with my own men." Hitler was caught between his two favorite organizations. The SS demanded their rightful place in protecting important commanders. But Rommel was winning battles, something that mattered more than ideology, in the middle of a war. After 3 days of deliberation, Hitler made his choice. Rommel could refuse SS protection. It was an almost unprecedented exception to SS authority. Himmler was furious. He immediately sent a message to all SS commanders, warning them about Wehrmacht arrogance and the need to maintain SS prerogatives. The message was clear: this wouldn't happen again. But Rommel wasn't finished. Emboldened by Hitler's support, he issued his own directive to Afrika Korps units. No SS personnel would be allowed in North Africa without his personal approval. No SS political officers. No SS liaisons. No SS observers. The desert would remain Wehrmacht territory. Captain Aldinger recorded another conversation where Rommel explained his reasoning to his senior officers. The SS fights for Hitler. We fight for Germany. Sometimes that's not the same thing. Those words would have been treasonous if anyone had reported them. But his officers understood exactly what he meant. The SS was a political organization first, military second. The Wehrmacht was military first, everything else second. The exclusion of SS forces from North Africa became a powerful symbol for Wehrmacht officers everywhere. If Rommel could say no to the SS, maybe they could too. Resistance to SS integration began spreading throughout Wehrmacht commands. General Heinz Guderian started requiring military necessity justification for any SS involvement in his tank operations. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt implemented coordination delays that effectively blocked SS units from joining Wehrmacht operations. Admiral Karl Dönitz banned SS personnel from submarine bases entirely. Each act of resistance was technically within military regulations, but collectively they represented open defiance of Nazi plans to integrate SS forces throughout the German military. The SS fought back through bureaucratic warfare. They began requiring Wehrmacht units to justify their rejection of SS assistance. They demanded written explanations for any operation that didn't include SS participation. They flooded Wehrmacht commands with paperwork designed to slow down non-SS operations. But Rommel had given Wehrmacht officers something more powerful than bureaucracy: precedent. Hitler himself had agreed that military effectiveness was more important than SS political control. The conflict reached a new level of intensity in December 1941. SS Oberfuhrer Kurt Meyer requested permission to bring an SS regiment to North Africa to observe Afrika Korps tactics. Officially, it was a training mission. Unofficially, everyone knew it was an attempt to establish SS presence in Rommel's territory. Rommel's response was swift and brutal. He denied the request and added a personal note. The Afrika Korps has no need for observers who have never fought in the desert. When the SS has combat experience equal to my veterans, they may observe. Until then, they would only be in the way. The insult was deliberate and public. Rommel was essentially calling the SS combat inexperienced amateurs. Meyer demanded satisfaction, a formal duel between officers. Rommel's aide recorded his commander's laughter when he heard about the duel challenge. "Tell Oberfuhrer Meyer that I don't duel with men who've never been shot at by the enemy. When he's earned his combat decorations the hard way, we can discuss honor." The rivalry was becoming personal, and personal rivalries in Nazi Germany had a way of turning deadly. But Rommel had one more card to play. His battlefield successes were making him untouchable. Every victory in North Africa strengthened his position against SS encroachment. Every captured British position was proof that Wehrmacht methods worked better than SS politics. By early 1942, the Rommel exception had become legendary throughout German forces. Wehrmacht officers would joke about needing desert transfers to escape SS interference. North Africa became known as the last place where real soldiers could fight a real war without political commissars looking over their shoulders. But the SS was patient. They knew that eventually even Rommel would need their help. And when that day came, they would collect on every insult, every refusal, every act of defiance. The Desert Fox had won this round, but the war between Wehrmacht and SS was just beginning. The supply convoy never arrived. For the third time in 2 weeks, Wehrmacht units on the Eastern Front were running low on ammunition while SS divisions nearby had stockpiles. It wasn't enemy action. It wasn't bad weather. It was sabotage. German sabotaging German. Captain Ernst Weber of the Wehrmacht's 3rd Panzer Division discovered the truth by accident. While searching for misdirected supplies, he found Wehrmacht supply officers deliberately routing SS shipments to wrong locations. When he confronted his own logistics chief, the man didn't even try to deny it. "They get the best of everything while our boys make do with scraps." Time they learned what shortage feels like. The supply wars had begun. Wehrmacht units were actively sabotaging SS operations, and the SS was returning the favor. Both sides were fighting 2 wars, one against the enemy another against each other. But ammunition wasn't the only thing being weaponized. Information was even more valuable and more dangerous. Lieutenant Colonel Hans Oster of Wehrmacht intelligence had been keeping detailed records of SS atrocities since 1939. Not for prosecution, for leverage. He understood that in the new Germany, information was power and compromised material was insurance. His files contained evidence that would hang half the SS leadership. Unauthorized executions, looting of captured territories, war crimes that violated even Nazi Germany's twisted version of military law. And he made sure certain SS commanders knew he had those files. The message was clear: stay out of Wehrmacht business, or these documents find their way to the wrong desks. SS Oberfuhrer Karl Wolff later testified to Allied interrogators about this intelligence war. We knew the Wehrmacht was documenting everything we did. Every operation, every casualty report, every irregular action. It felt like fighting with a knife at our backs. But the Wehrmacht's most devastating weapon wasn't supplies or information. It was reputation. Wehrmacht officers began warning civilian populations about incoming SS units. Not officially, that would be treason. But word spread through unofficial channels whenever SS divisions were approaching. Villagers would evacuate. Resistance groups would prepare for brutal crackdowns. Local administrators would hide records and valuables. The warnings were ostensibly for civilian protection, but they had a devastating effect on SS operations. Empty villages yielded no intelligence. Hidden records meant no administrative control. Evacuated civilians couldn't be used as forced labor. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg recorded one such incident in his private notes. Warned the mayor of Tarnopol that SS units were arriving tomorrow. Told him it was for security preparations. By morning, half the town had disappeared into the countryside. Let the SS explain to Berlin why their pacification operation found nobody to pacify. The SS retaliated by questioning Wehrmacht loyalty. They began filing reports about defeatist attitudes and insufficient National Socialist commitment among Wehrmacht officers. Each report was a potential death sentence in Nazi Germany. But the Wehrmacht had their own ways of fighting back. They started excluding SS units from operational planning meetings. Critical intelligence about enemy positions would somehow fail to reach SS commanders until it was too late to act. Radio frequencies would mysteriously change without notification to SS units. The most damaging form of sabotage was coordination failure. Wehrmacht and SS units operating in the same areas would receive conflicting orders, contradictory timing, incompatible objectives. Operations would collapse in confusion, with each side blaming the other. General Gotthard Heinrici later described the intentional chaos to American interrogators. We would plan an operation for 600 hours. The SS would be told 800. When they arrived late and the operation failed, we'd file reports about SS unreliability. They'd file reports about Wehrmacht sabotage. Both reports were true. But perhaps the most shocking evidence of internal warfare came from captured Wehrmacht communications. Allied codebreakers intercepted radio messages between Wehrmacht units that revealed the depth of anti-SS sentiment. SS Panzer Group requesting artillery support grid 77 Alpha. Recommend negative. Let them solve their own problems. Intelligence indicates enemy counterattack probable. Wehrmacht units withdraw to secondary positions. SS units maintain current positions. Do not advise SS of withdrawal. We'd rather lose a battle than let the SS win it. That last message, intercepted in July 1943, shocked Allied intelligence analysts. The German military was willing to accept tactical defeats rather than allow their SS allies to claim victories. The Nazi war machine was consuming itself from within. The sabotage wasn't limited to combat operations. Wehrmacht medical units would develop supply shortages when treating SS wounded. SS casualties would experience administrative delays in medical evacuation. Critical medications would be unavailable for SS field hospitals. Dr. Heinrich Berning, a Wehrmacht combat surgeon, later testified about the medical warfare. We took an oath to treat all wounded German soldiers equally. But when SS men came to our aid stations, equipment malfunctioned. Supplies ran short. Medications expired. We never refused treatment, but somehow SS casualties took longer to stabilize. The psychological warfare was equally vicious. Wehrmacht units would spread rumors about SS cowardice, SS incompetence, SS political connections being more important than combat effectiveness. These rumors would reach frontline soldiers, undermining SS morale and cohesion. Meanwhile, SS units retaliated by questioning Wehrmacht political reliability. They'd file reports about suspicious Wehrmacht officers who showed insufficient enthusiasm for Nazi racial policies. They'd investigate Wehrmacht units for defeatist attitudes after tactical withdrawals. By 1943, the internal warfare had become so destructive that Hitler himself was forced to intervene. He issued orders requiring coordination between Wehrmacht and SS units. But coordination required trust, and trust had been destroyed by 2 years of mutual sabotage. The irony was lost on no one. Germany was fighting a global war while its own forces fought each other. The Wehrmacht and SS were spending more energy destroying each other than defeating their enemies. And the enemies were watching. Allied intelligence was intercepting the evidence of German internal warfare and adjusting their strategies accordingly. They knew that Wehrmacht and SS units wouldn't support each other effectively. They knew that coordination would fail under pressure. They knew that Germany's greatest weakness wasn't military, it was political. The sabotage war had achieved something no Allied operation could. It had turned the German military against itself. And once that trust was broken, it could never be repaired. Hitler had created 2 armies to serve one purpose. Instead, he'd created one purpose, being served by 2 enemies. December 17th, 1944. A crossroads near Malmedy, Belgium. Snow covered the ground, and American prisoners of war stood in a field, with their hands raised. What happened next would destroy any remaining unity between Wehrmacht and SS forces forever. SS Oberfuhrer Joachim Paper commanded the 1st SS Panzer Division, advancing through the Ardennes. His unit had captured 84 American soldiers during the Battle of the Bulge. Standard military protocol required processing these prisoners and sending them to POW camps. Instead, Paper gave a different order. "We don't have time for prisoners. You know what to do." The SS soldiers opened fire. 84 American prisoners were murdered in cold blood. No trial. No military justification. Just execution. But this time, Wehrmacht officers were watching. Major Werner Potschke of the Wehrmacht's 2nd Panzer Division had arrived at the crossroads minutes after the massacre. His unit was supposed to coordinate with Paper's SS forces for the next phase of the offensive. Instead, he found a field full of American bodies and SS soldiers looting the corpses. Potschke's radio operator, Corporal Franz Siebert, later testified to Allied interrogators about what his commander said when he saw the scene. "Mein Gott. They've done it again. These animals have doomed us all." The Wehrmacht had been fighting alongside the SS for years, but most officers had never witnessed SS atrocities firsthand. They'd heard rumors. They'd seen reports. But Malmedy was different. This was mass murder happening right in front of them, in broad daylight, with no attempt at concealment. Major Potschke confronted Paper directly. "What you've done here violates every rule of war. These men were prisoners. They were defenseless." Paper's response, recorded by multiple witnesses, showed the gulf between Wehrmacht and SS thinking. Rules of war? We're fighting for the survival of the Aryan race. There are no rules in a race war. Potschke immediately radioed Wehrmacht command, not to report tactical developments, to report a war crime. His message, intercepted by Allied intelligence, was stark. SS units have executed American prisoners. Estimate 80 casualties. Requesting immediate clarification of Wehrmacht policy regarding cooperation with SS forces involved in illegal actions. The response from Wehrmacht headquarters came within hours. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, was explicit. Wehrmacht units will not participate in prisoner executions. Any SS requests for Wehrmacht support in such actions will be refused. Document all incidents for post-war accountability. That last line was devastating. Wehrmacht command was already planning to blame the SS for war crimes after Germany lost the war. They were creating a paper trail to separate themselves from SS atrocities. But the damage went far beyond documentation. Word of Malmedy spread through Wehrmacht units faster than official reports. Soldiers who had reluctantly cooperated with SS forces now refused outright. Sergeant Klaus Weber of the Wehrmacht's Panzer Lehr Division later described the reaction in his unit. After Malmedy, everything changed. Before, we thought the SS were fanatics but still soldiers. After, we knew they were murderers. No Wehrmacht soldier wanted to be associated with that. The SS tried to justify the massacre through official channels. Heinrich Himmler personally sent a message to Wehrmacht leadership, claiming the Americans had been attempting to escape and were shot while fleeing. The Wehrmacht's response was unprecedented. They officially rejected the SS explanation. General Wilhelm Keitel, Chief of Wehrmacht High Command, sent a classified memo to all Army Group commanders. SS explanations regarding prisoner incidents are not supported by Wehrmacht observations. Wehrmacht personnel will provide accurate testimony regarding all prisoner-related incidents when requested by appropriate authorities. It was a declaration of independence. The Wehrmacht was publicly contradicting SS accounts and promising to testify against them. The united front between German military forces had shattered completely. The psychological impact on Wehrmacht soldiers was devastating. They realized that their reputation was tied to SS actions, whether they participated or not. Every Wehrmacht soldier would be seen as complicit in SS war crimes simply by wearing the same national insignia. Captain Ernst von Lahausen, Wehrmacht intelligence officer, was secretly recorded by British intelligence expressing the despair felt by many Wehrmacht officers. This is exactly what we warned would happen. Now we're all painted with their blood. The world will judge all German soldiers by what the SS has done. Our honor is destroyed by association. Wehrmacht units began taking unprecedented steps to distance themselves from SS operations. They started maintaining separate prisoner processing facilities. They refused to transfer captured enemy personnel to SS custody. They established independent communication channels to avoid SS monitoring. Most shocking of all, some Wehrmacht officers began warning Allied forces about SS unit locations and movements. Not as formal intelligence sharing, that would be treason, but through inadvertent radio transmissions on frequencies they knew were monitored. Through misdirected messages that found their way to enemy hands. Major Georg Gross-Johann later admitted to American interrogators, "After Malmedy, some of us felt the Allies had more honor than our own SS. At least, when Americans captured SS prisoners, they didn't execute them in fields. Maybe the wrong side was winning this war." The SS retaliated by questioning Wehrmacht loyalty more aggressively. SS security services began investigating Wehrmacht officers for defeatist attitudes. They filed reports claiming Wehrmacht sabotage of SS operations. They demanded Wehrmacht cooperation in security measures against captured partisans and civilians. Each demand was refused. Each refusal escalated the internal conflict. By January 1945, the situation had deteriorated so badly that Hitler himself was forced to intervene. He issued orders requiring coordination between Wehrmacht and SS forces. But the orders were ignored by both sides. Wehrmacht field reports from this period reveal the complete breakdown of cooperation. SS requests for artillery support denied due to target verification requirements. Wehrmacht medical facilities unavailable for SS casualties due to supply shortages. Communication equipment malfunction prevents coordination with SS units. Every excuse was technically legitimate. Collectively, they represented systematic Wehrmacht sabotage of SS operations. The German military was at war with itself. The final break came in February 1945. SS Brigade Führer Kurt Meyer requested Wehrmacht engineering support to construct detention facilities for captured civilians. The Wehrmacht response was immediate and final. Wehrmacht engineers construct military fortifications, not execution facilities. Request denied permanently. It was over. Any pretense of cooperation between Wehrmacht and SS forces had ended. They were fighting the same war for opposite reasons, and Malmedy had made the differences impossible to ignore. The massacre had done more than kill 84 American prisoners. It had killed the myth of German military unity. From Malmedy forward, Wehrmacht and SS forces would fight as separate armies wearing the same uniform. And soon, they would be fighting each other directly. July 20th, 1944. Wolf's Lair, East Prussia. The briefing room exploded at 12:42 p.m. Adolf Hitler survived the assassination attempt. Barely. But what followed wasn't just a hunt for conspirators. It was the SS seizing total control of the German military. The bomb had been planted by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, a Wehrmacht officer who'd lost his left eye, right hand, and 2 fingers fighting for Germany. He wasn't trying to help the Allies. He was trying to save Germany from the SS. 3 days before the assassination attempt, British intelligence had intercepted a radio transmission that revealed the true scope of Wehrmacht desperation. Allied codebreakers were monitoring German military communications when they heard something extraordinary. Wehrmacht officers planning to arrest SS leadership. The recording was declassified in 1978. General Friedrich Olbricht, speaking to other conspirators, laid out their plan. After we kill Hitler, Himmler and his black uniformed thugs are next. The SS has infected our military like a cancer. We'll arrest every SS officer above the rank of Oberführer and put them on trial for war crimes. This wasn't just about removing Hitler. This was Wehrmacht officers planning to physically destroy the SS as an organization. They wanted to restore traditional military command and eliminate political soldiers entirely. Major General Henning von Treschow, one of the key conspirators, was even more explicit in a conversation recorded by Wehrmacht intelligence and later captured by the Allies. The SS represents everything wrong with our new Germany. They've turned military service into political theatre. They've corrupted our officer corps with their racial nonsense. When this is over, every SS officer will face court-martial for crimes against military honor. But the SS had their own intelligence network, and they were listening too. SS Oberführer Werner Best had been monitoring Wehrmacht communications since early 1944. He'd heard the growing discontent, the complaints about SS interference, the questions about Hitler's leadership. When he intercepted references to removing obstacles to military efficiency, he knew what it meant. 3 hours after the Wolf's Lair explosion, while Hitler was still being treated for his injuries, Heinrich Himmler made his move. He didn't wait for Hitler's orders. He didn't consult with Wehrmacht leadership. He declared martial law and placed SS forces in control of all military communications, transportation, and supply networks. It was a coup disguised as emergency security measures. Colonel General Ludwig Beck, the former Wehrmacht chief of staff and leader of the conspiracy, realized immediately what was happening. His final message, sent just before SS forces surrounded Wehrmacht headquarters, was desperate. All Wehrmacht commanders, Priority Alpha. SS forces are seizing control under emergency authority. This is not authorized by Wehrmacht High Command. Resist SS takeover attempts. Maintain military chain of command. But it was too late. SS units had already surrounded key Wehrmacht installations. They weren't arresting conspirators. They were arresting anyone who might resist SS authority. The purge that followed was unprecedented in German military history. Not just conspirators were eliminated. Any Wehrmacht officer who had ever questioned SS methods. Anyone who had refused SS cooperation. Anyone who represented the old military traditions that threatened SS political control. General Erich Hoppner, who had commanded panzer groups on the Eastern Front, was arrested not for participating in the plot but for criticizing SS tank tactics in official reports. His crime was military professionalism that challenged SS competence. Field Marshal Erwin von Witzleben was executed not just for conspiracy, but for his public statements about SS, political interference, in military operations. The message was clear. Questioning the SS was now equivalent to treason. But the most chilling testimony came from survivors. Colonel Rudolf Christoph von Gersdorf, who escaped the initial purge, was secretly recorded by Allied intelligence after his capture. They weren't just killing resistors. They were eliminating anyone who questioned the SS. Anyone who remembered what the German military was like before the Nazis. They were erasing our institutional memory. The executions continued for weeks. Over 4,000 Wehrmacht officers were arrested. Nearly 200 were executed immediately. The remainder faced imprisonment, demotion, or transfer to SS control. General Friedrich Fromm, commander of the replacement army, tried to save himself by personally arresting conspirators. It didn't matter. The SS executed him anyway. His crime wasn't conspiracy. It was commanding Wehrmacht forces that should have been under SS control. Major Otto Remmer, an SS officer who helped suppress the coup, later boasted about the purge's true purpose. July 20th wasn't about saving Hitler. Hitler was barely injured. It was about finishing what we started in 1933, eliminating the old military class that threatened our revolution. The political reshuffling that followed confirmed Wehrmacht fears. Heinrich Himmler was appointed commander of the replacement army, a traditionally Wehrmacht position. SS officers were placed in command of major Wehrmacht units. Military academies were purged of politically unreliable instructors. Most devastating of all, the SS gained control of Wehrmacht intelligence services. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence organization, was dissolved and absorbed into SS security services. Wehrmacht officers lost their independent source of information about enemy capabilities and intentions. General Reinhard Gehlen, former head of Wehrmacht intelligence on the Eastern Front, described the impact in post-war testimony. After July 20th, we were fighting blind. All our intelligence came through SS channels. They filtered everything through their political agenda. We stopped getting accurate reports about Soviet strength because the SS only wanted to hear good news. The transformation was completed by September 1944. Wehrmacht units found themselves commanded by SS officers who had no military training but absolute political authority. Traditional military protocols were replaced by SS racial ideology. Combat effectiveness became secondary to political reliability. The result was military chaos. SS commanders ordered attacks based on political objectives rather than tactical sense. Wehrmacht officers who protested these orders faced court-martial for defeatism. Units began receiving contradictory orders from Wehrmacht and SS command structures. Captain Bernd Freytag von Loringhoven, one of the few Wehrmacht staff officers to survive the purge, kept a secret diary documenting the collapse. September 15th. SS Oberfuhrer demands attack on Soviet positions without artillery preparation. Military suicide, but questioning orders means arrest. We're not soldiers anymore. We're hostages of our own government. October 3rd. Wehrmacht casualty reports modified by SS censors before reaching high command. They're hiding our losses to maintain morale. How can we plan operations without accurate information? November 20th. 3 Wehrmacht colonels arrested for pessimistic assessments of German defensive capabilities. Truth is now treason. We're living in a military fantasy. By winter 1944, Wehrmacht officers were planning their own resistance to SS control. Not another assassination attempt. They'd learned that lesson. Instead, they began systematically undermining SS military authority through bureaucratic warfare. False reports, delayed orders, communication failures that prevented SS units from coordinating effectively, supplies misdirected to Wehrmacht units instead of SS formations, medical evacuations unavailable for SS casualties. The SS responded with increasing brutality. Wehrmacht officers were executed for sabotage based on the flimsiest evidence. Entire Wehrmacht units were disbanded and their personnel transferred to SS control. Military traditions dating back centuries were declared politically unreliable and banned. General Walter Warlimont, Deputy Chief of Wehrmacht Operations Staff, captured the desperation in his final report before fleeing to Allied lines. The SS has destroyed the German military from within. We are no longer fighting for Germany. We are fighting for Himmler's vision of racial empire. The Wehrmacht as an institution is dead. What remains is a collection of SS political units wearing Wehrmacht uniforms. July 20th had failed to kill Hitler, but it had succeeded in killing something else, any remaining cooperation between Wehrmacht and SS forces. The coup attempt had given the SS the excuse they needed to eliminate Wehrmacht independence completely. What emerged wasn't German military unity. It was SS military dictatorship. And Wehrmacht officers who survived the purge would never forget who had destroyed their institution. The recording that almost started a civil war had instead ended one. The Wehrmacht had lost. The SS had won. But the war wasn't over yet, and the Wehrmacht was about to get their revenge in the most unexpected way possible. May 5th, 1945. Castle Itter, Austria. The war was ending, but one Wehrmacht major was about to make history by doing something unprecedented, fighting alongside Americans against his own countrymen. Major Josef Gangl commanded the Wehrmacht garrison at Castle Itter, a fortress that had been converted into a prison for high-value French political prisoners. Former prime ministers, resistance leaders, anyone the SS considered too dangerous to execute, but too important to release. That morning, Gangl received new orders from SS Oberfuhrer Walter Weiss. Execute all prisoners immediately. Leave no witnesses. Destroy all evidence. Germany was collapsing, and the SS wanted to eliminate anyone who might testify about their crimes. Gangl stared at the order for a long time. Then he called his senior sergeant. "I'm a soldier, not a murderer," he said quietly. "We're not doing this." It was a death sentence. Refusing direct SS orders meant execution for treason. But Gangl had watched the SS destroy everything he'd served for 30 years to protect. German military honor, professional competence, basic human decency. He'd had enough. Sergeant Hans Waltner later testified to American investigators about his commander's decision. The major said we'd spent 6 years watching SS murderers destroy Germany's reputation. He wouldn't let them add these prisoners to their list of victims. If that made us traitors to the SS, so be it. We were still loyal to Germany. But refusing the order was only the beginning. Gangl knew that SS reinforcements would arrive within hours to carry out the executions themselves. His small Wehrmacht garrison couldn't hold the castle against a determined SS assault. So he made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. He contacted the approaching American forces and offered to surrender the castle if they would help him protect the prisoners from the SS. The radio message, recorded by American intelligence, was unprecedented. American forces, this is Wehrmacht Major Gangl at Castle Itter. I have French political prisoners under my protection. SS forces are approaching to execute these prisoners. I request immediate assistance to prevent war crimes. Will provide intelligence and tactical support against SS positions. Lieutenant Jack Lee of the American 12th Armored Division couldn't believe what he was hearing. A Wehrmacht officer was asking for help to fight the SS. It violated every assumption about German military unity. But Lee was a practical soldier. He had 5 Sherman tanks and 36 men. The castle had stone walls, 3 feet thick, and commanding terrain. If Wehrmacht soldiers wanted to help him rescue Allied prisoners, he'd take all the help he could get. The alliance was formalized in the most surreal way possible. American tanks rolled up to the castle gates, while Wehrmacht soldiers stood guard. German and American officers shook hands and began planning joint defensive positions. Former enemies became temporary allies against a common threat. The French prisoners watched in amazement as American and Wehrmacht soldiers shared rations and ammunition. Edouard Daladier, former French Prime Minister, later wrote, "I witnessed something I never thought possible. German soldiers preparing to fight other Germans to protect French lives. The Wehrmacht major told me, 'We're soldiers, not SS thugs. Soldiers protect prisoners, they don't murder them.'" The SS assault began at dawn on May 6th. 200 SS troops supported by artillery and armored vehicles surrounded the castle. SS Oberfuhrer Weiss personally commanded the attack, determined to eliminate both the prisoners and the treasonous Wehrmacht garrison. But the defenders were ready. American tanks provided heavy firepower, while Wehrmacht soldiers used their intimate knowledge of the castle's defenses to coordinate resistance. It was the only battle in World War II where German and American forces fought side by side. Sergeant Waltner described the surreal experience of the battle. "I was shooting at men wearing my own uniform. SS troops in the same grey as us, but they weren't my countrymen anymore. They were murderers trying to kill prisoners we'd sworn to protect. The Americans beside me understood honor better than those SS animals." The fighting was vicious. SS forces knew they were attacking traitors and showed no mercy. Wehrmacht defenders knew they were fighting for their lives and their honor. American forces found themselves in the middle of a German civil war. Private Jimmy Sutton of the 12th Armored later recalled the confusion. "We're shooting at Germans while other Germans shoot back at the same targets. Wehrmacht sergeant next to me knows exactly where the SS machine gun positions are. He's calling out targets in broken English while loading American ammunition into his German rifle. Craziest thing I ever saw." The battle reached its climax when SS forces breached the outer courtyard. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted between Wehrmacht and SS soldiers. Major Gangl led his men in a counterattack to retake the main gate. That's when an SS sniper's bullet found him. Gangl fell in the courtyard, dying in the service of protecting Allied prisoners from his own side. His last words, recorded by multiple witnesses, captured the tragedy of Germany's internal war. "Tell them, we remembered what soldiers are supposed to be." The Wehrmacht soldiers fought with desperate fury after their commander's death. This wasn't just about protecting prisoners anymore. It was about proving that German military honor could still exist despite the SS. They were fighting to redeem their own reputation. American reinforcements arrived just as SS forces prepared their final assault. The additional firepower broke the SS attack completely. Oberfuhrer Weiss ordered a retreat, abandoning his mission rather than face combined American Wehrmacht resistance. The battle was over. The prisoners were safe. But the implications were staggering. For the first time in the war, Wehrmacht soldiers had openly fought against SS forces. Not bureaucratic resistance, not passive sabotage. Open combat. Germans killing Germans in a battle over the soul of their military. Lieutenant Lee filed a report that captured the significance. Wehrmacht forces provided full cooperation in defending Allied prisoners against SS execution squad. German Major Gangl died, protecting French political prisoners from his own countrymen. Wehrmacht personnel expressed hatred for SS methods and determination to preserve military honor. Recommend recognition of Wehrmacht cooperation in preventing war crimes. The French prisoners were evacuated safely to American lines. The surviving Wehrmacht soldiers surrendered to American forces and were treated as prisoners of war, not war criminals. They had earned respect through their final act of defiance. But Castle Itter represented more than a successful rescue mission. It was proof that the conflict between Wehrmacht and SS had become absolute. Wehrmacht officers were willing to fight alongside enemy forces rather than serve SS political objectives. Sergeant Waltner, interviewed in American captivity, explained the significance. People will say we were traitors for fighting with Americans against Germans. But those SS weren't Germans anymore. They were something else, something that had nothing to do with the Germany we served. Major Gangl died fighting for German honor against German shame. The Battle of Castle Itter had lasted less than 24 hours, but it had demonstrated something that would shock the post-war world. Wehrmacht hatred for the SS was so complete that they would literally fight alongside enemy forces rather than participate in SS atrocities. It was the final, definitive break between the two German military organizations. And it proved that the Wehrmacht's opposition to the SS wasn't just political or professional. It was moral. Major Gangl had died defending Allied prisoners against his own countrymen. His sacrifice would become a symbol of the German military's attempt to preserve honor in the face of SS criminality. But it would also raise uncomfortable questions about how many Wehrmacht officers had been too afraid to make the same choice. The castle had been liberated. The prisoners had been saved. But the war between Wehrmacht and SS would continue even after Germany surrendered. Dr. Heinrich Böning had taken the Hippocratic Oath twice. Once in medical school, once when he joined the Wehrmacht Medical Corps. First, do no harm. But in the field hospitals of the Eastern Front, 1943, that oath was being tested in ways no medical school had prepared him for. Wehrmacht wounded came through his aid station alongside SS casualties. Same uniforms, same blood, same desperate need for medical attention. But Böning quickly discovered they weren't receiving the same treatment. The SS had their own medical protocols, and they had nothing to do with healing. SS Sturmbannführer Karl Gensken arrived at Böning's field hospital in July 1943 with explicit orders. SS wounded would receive enhanced treatment designed to return them to combat as quickly as possible. No extended recovery periods. No medical discharge recommendations. Just drugs and procedures that would get SS soldiers back to the front line. Böning watched in horror as SS medics administered massive doses of methamphetamine to wounded SS soldiers. Morphine to mask pain. Cocaine to maintain alertness. Experimental stimulants that had never been tested for safety. Men with serious injuries were being turned into drug-addicted zombies and sent back to fight. SS medics were experimenting on their own wounded. Böning testified to Allied interrogators after the war. They had orders to return soldiers to duty, regardless of medical condition. We tried to stop them, but they had political authority over medical decisions. The Wehrmacht medical staff protested through official channels. Medical ethics required that wounded soldiers receive appropriate treatment and adequate recovery time. Pumping injured men full of stimulants and sending them back to combat violated every principle of military medicine. The SS response was immediate and brutal. Wehrmacht medical personnel who refused to cooperate with SS enhanced treatment protocols faced court-martial for sabotage of military efficiency. Several Wehrmacht doctors were arrested and charged with treason. But Berning and his medical staff found their own ways to resist. They began maintaining two sets of medical records. Official records that showed SS wounded receiving enhanced treatment. Secret records that documented the actual medical procedures and their results. These hidden files would become devastating evidence of SS medical crimes. Nurse Greta Hoffmann, who worked under Berning's command, kept a secret diary documenting what she witnessed. July 23rd. SS soldier brought in with severe abdominal wounds. Needs immediate surgery and weeks of recovery. SS medic instead gives him morphine injection and methamphetamine pills. Sends him back to combat unit within 6 hours. He'll be dead within days. August 5th. Wehrmacht soldier with identical wounds receives proper surgical treatment and medical evacuation to rear hospital. He'll recover completely. Same injury, different uniform, completely different treatment. The SS is murdering its own men with medical malpractice. The differences in treatment became so obvious that even wounded soldiers began to notice. SS casualties would beg to be treated by Wehrmacht medical personnel. They knew that Wehrmacht doctors actually tried to heal them, rather than just drug them back to combat. Sergeant Klaus Weber, an SS soldier wounded near Kursk, later testified about his experience. I had shrapnel in my chest and lung damage from a grenade explosion. SS medic gave me pills that made me feel invincible but couldn't breathe properly. Told me to return to my unit immediately. Wehrmacht doctor pulled me aside and said the pills were hiding serious internal injuries. He probably saved my life by insisting on proper X-rays. But the Wehrmacht medical staff's resistance went beyond just providing better treatment. They began actively sabotaging SS medical protocols. Equipment would malfunction when treating SS casualties. Medications would be unavailable or expired. Diagnostic equipment would need recalibration just when SS wounded needed evaluation. Critical procedures would be delayed by supply shortages or communication problems. Dr. Berning later admitted to American investigators, "We never refused treatment to SS casualties. That would have been murder, and we were still doctors. But somehow, SS soldiers took longer to stabilize. Equipment failed more often. Medications were harder to find. We couldn't prevent their medical abuse, but we could slow it down." The most shocking discovery came in September 1943. Berning found SS medical personnel conducting experimental procedures on wounded soldiers without their consent. testing new surgical techniques, trying untested medications, using wounded men as laboratory subjects. The experiments had nothing to do with treating combat injuries. SS doctors were testing procedures they planned to use in concentration camps, using their own wounded soldiers as practice subjects before moving on to prisoners. Berning immediately confronted SS Sturmbannführer Gensken. These men are patients, not experimental subjects. What you're doing violates every medical oath. It's torture disguised as treatment. Gensken's response revealed the complete moral bankruptcy of SS medical practice. These soldiers serve the Reich. If their suffering advances medical knowledge for the Aryan race, their sacrifice has meaning. Your bourgeois medical ethics are obstacles to scientific progress. That night, Berning made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He began secretly documenting SS medical experiments with photographs and detailed notes. If he survived the war, someone needed to testify about what the SS had done to their own soldiers. But documentation wasn't enough. Wehrmacht medical staff began actively protecting SS wounded from their own medical officers. They would accidentally give incorrect information about patient locations. They would misplace medical records. They would declare patients too critical for experimental procedures. The conflict escalated when Wehrmacht doctors began refusing to transfer SS casualties to SS medical facilities. They cited medical necessity and patient stability concerns. In reality, they were protecting wounded soldiers from further abuse by their own side. Nurse Hoffmann's diary entries from this period reveal the moral anguish of Wehrmacht medical personnel. October 12th. SS medic demands transfer of wounded soldier for special treatment. We know what that means. Dr. Berning declares patient too unstable for transport. We're lying to protect a man from his own medical officers. What have we become? The situation reached a breaking point in November 1943. SS medical personnel demanded access to Wehrmacht medical supplies and equipment for their experimental procedures. Wehrmacht doctors refused, claiming supplies were needed for legitimate medical treatment. The standoff lasted 3 days. SS officers threatened to arrest Wehrmacht medical staff for sabotage. Wehrmacht doctors threatened to report SS medical abuse to military high command. Neither side backed down. The resolution came from an unexpected source. Wounded soldiers, both Wehrmacht and SS, began refusing treatment from SS medical personnel. They demanded to be treated only by Wehrmacht doctors, who actually tried to heal them rather than experiment on them. SS Unterscharführer Franz Müller, wounded in a tank battle, spoke for many when he told Allied interrogators, "I'd rather risk dying with Wehrmacht medics than survive SS medical treatment. At least Wehrmacht doctors saw me as a human being, not a laboratory rat. My own SS medics treated me worse than the enemy would have." By winter 1943, the medical war between Wehrmacht and SS had become absolute. Wehrmacht medical facilities refused SS oversight. SS medical personnel were banned from Wehrmacht aid stations. Wounded soldiers were treated based on which medical system reached them first. The final break came when Berning discovered SS medical records being falsified to hide experimental casualties. Soldiers who died from medical abuse were listed as combat fatalities. Men disabled by experimental procedures were recorded as enemy action casualties. The SS was covering up their own medical war crimes. Berning's final diary entry before the end of the war captured the complete moral collapse. March 20th, 1945. We let some SS wounded die, rather than let them return to commit more atrocities. I violated my medical oath to prevent greater violations of human decency. God forgive us all. We've become as corrupted as the system we're fighting. After the war, Berning turned over his secret medical records to Allied investigators. His documentation helped convict SS medical personnel of war crimes at Nuremberg. But his testimony also revealed an uncomfortable truth. The Wehrmacht Medical Corps had become complicit in medical warfare by choosing which wounded soldiers deserved treatment. The SS had turned military medicine into an instrument of political control. The Wehrmacht had responded by turning medical care into an act of resistance. Both sides had corrupted the fundamental principle of military medicine: treat the wounded, regardless of politics. In the end, the medical war between Wehrmacht and SS had claimed more casualties than any battle. Not just the soldiers who died from medical abuse or neglect, but the doctors and nurses who had been forced to choose between professional ethics and political survival. The Hippocratic Oath had become another casualty of the war between Hitler's armies. May 8th, 1945. Germany surrendered. The war was over. But for Wehrmacht and SS officers, another war was just beginning. In prisoner of war camps across occupied Germany, former Wehrmacht officers were making deals with Allied intelligence. Not for better treatment, not for early release, for revenge. They were offering to identify SS war criminals in exchange for one simple promise: the SS officers who had destroyed the German military would face justice, even if that justice came from enemy tribunals. Colonel Hans Oster, former Wehrmacht intelligence chief, was among the first to approach American interrogators. His offer was unprecedented: complete Wehrmacht intelligence files on SS war crimes. Names, dates, locations, witnesses. Everything needed to prosecute SS leadership for crimes against humanity. But Oster's motivation wasn't justice. It was hatred. We gave them names, locations, everything, he told American intelligence officer William Donovan. After what they did to us, to Germany, to the military honor we spent centuries building, they deserved whatever they got. The tables had turned completely. Wehrmacht officers who had spent years being hunted by SS security services were now hunting their former tormentors. And they had advantages the SS never possessed: detailed knowledge of SS operations, access to hidden records, and most importantly, Allied protection. The hunt began with the tattoos. Every SS soldier had been required to have his blood type tattooed under his left arm. Originally designed for rapid medical treatment, these tattoos had become death sentences. Wehrmacht officers helped Allied investigators identified disguised SS personnel by their permanent markings. Major Klaus Huber, former Wehrmacht military police, described the irony to British interrogators. For years, the SS flaunted those tattoos as marks of elite status. Now they were trying to burn them off with cigarettes or cut them out with knives. We knew exactly what to look for. Every SS man who had ever humiliated a Wehrmacht soldier was marked for life. The Wehrmacht's intelligence files proved devastating. They had been documenting SS crimes since 1939, not for prosecution, but for leverage. Now those carefully maintained records became evidence in war crimes trials. General Franz Halder, former chief of Wehrmacht General Staff, handed over files containing evidence against over 3,000 SS officers. His testimony at Nuremberg was devastating. The Wehrmacht maintained detailed records of SS activities because we knew someday we would need to prove our separation from their crimes. We documented every atrocity, every illegal order, every violation of military law. Not because we planned to stop them, because we planned to survive them. But the Wehrmacht's cooperation went beyond just providing evidence. They began actively hunting down former SS officers who were trying to escape prosecution. Colonel Otto Remmer, former SS officer who had helped suppress the July 20th plot, was captured because Wehrmacht veterans provided intelligence about his hiding place. They knew his habits, his contacts, his escape routes. Information they had gathered during years of forced cooperation with SS units. The revenge was personal and systematic. Wehrmacht officers testified against SS commanders who had humiliated them during the war. They provided evidence against SS personnel who had questioned their loyalty. They destroyed SS defense claims with first-hand testimony about SS incompetence and brutality. Captain Ernst Weber, who had discovered Wehrmacht supply sabotage in 1943, became a key witness against SS logistics personnel. They claimed they were elite soldiers deserving the best equipment. I testified that they were political appointees who couldn't tell a rifle from a radio. My testimony helped convict 12 SS officers of war crimes. It felt like justice for every Wehrmacht soldier who died with inferior equipment while SS units got the best of everything. The irony was extraordinary. Former brothers in arms were sending each other to the gallows. Wehrmacht testimony was destroying SS defense claims. Men who had worn the same uniform were competing to see who could provide more damaging evidence against the other side. But the Wehrmacht's motivation wasn't entirely vindictive. Many officers genuinely believed that exposing SS crimes would rehabilitate the German military's reputation. If they could prove that Wehrmacht and SS were separate organizations with different values, maybe military tradition could survive Nazi contamination. General Heinz Guderian explained this thinking to American interrogators. We cooperated with Allied prosecutors because we wanted the world to understand that real German soldiers were different from SS political fanatics. If documenting SS crimes could save German military honor, then documenting those crimes was our duty. The strategy worked better than anyone expected. At Nuremberg, the SS was declared a criminal organization, while the Wehrmacht was essentially cleared of institutional guilt. Wehrmacht testimony had been crucial in making that distinction. But some Wehrmacht officers went further than just providing testimony. They began personally hunting former SS personnel who had escaped Allied justice. Colonel Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg's brother, Berthold, spent years after the war tracking down SS officers who had participated in the July 20th purge. Not for prosecution, the war crimes trials were over. For personal vengeance. Several former SS officers died in accidents that were never fully investigated. The hunt wasn't limited to high-ranking officers. Wehrmacht veterans formed informal networks to identify former SS personnel trying to blend into civilian life. They shared information about SS veterans' new identities, locations, and activities. Many SS veterans found themselves unemployable because Wehrmacht veterans controlled significant portions of post-war German industry and government. Heinrich Börning, the Wehrmacht medic who had documented SS medical crimes, became particularly effective at exposing former SS medical personnel. His secret wartime records helped convict dozens of SS doctors and medics. But his post-war activities went beyond testimony. Börning spent decades ensuring that former SS medical personnel could never practice medicine again. He provided evidence to medical licensing boards. He contacted hospital administrators. He made sure that SS veterans who had corrupted military medicine could never corrupt civilian medicine. They turned healing into an instrument of political control, Börning told a medical ethics conference in 1955. I made it my life's work to ensure they never had that opportunity again. The most chilling aspect of the post-war hunt was how Wehrmacht veterans justified their actions. They didn't see themselves as vindictive. They saw themselves as patriotic Germans protecting their country from SS contamination. The SS had corrupted German institutions during the war. Wehrmacht veterans were preventing them from corrupting German institutions after the war. General Wilhelm Keitel's aide, Major Gerhard Bolt, summarized this thinking in a 1960 memoir. We hunted them because someone had to. The SS had destroyed everything good about Germany during the war. If we let them rebuild influence after the war, they would destroy everything good about the new Germany too. Stopping them wasn't revenge, it was patriotic duty. By 1950, the Wehrmacht's post-war campaign had achieved remarkable success. Most high-ranking SS officers were dead, imprisoned, or in hiding. SS veterans found themselves excluded from positions of influence in post-war Germany. Wehrmacht veterans, meanwhile, dominated the new German military, government, and industry. The irony was complete. The SS had won the internal war during 1944 and 45. But the Wehrmacht had won the peace. Former enemies had become more useful allies than former friends. Wehrmacht officers found more common ground with Allied prosecutors than they had ever found with SS commanders. Both sides valued military professionalism over political fanaticism. Both sides believed in rules of war over racial ideology. The hunt that began in 1945 continued for decades. Wehrmacht veterans never stopped tracking former SS personnel. They never stopped providing evidence to prosecutors. They never stopped working to ensure that SS veterans remained excluded from German society. In the end, the Wehrmacht's post-war revenge was more complete than any military victory. They had not just defeated the SS, they had erased them from German history. The organization that had once threatened to replace the traditional military had been systematically eliminated by the military they had tried to replace. But the hunt had required Wehrmacht veterans to make a devil's bargain. To destroy the SS, they had collaborated with enemy forces more completely than they had ever collaborated with their supposed SS allies. They had chosen foreign prosecutors over German comrades. They had chosen enemy justice over nationalist loyalty. The Wehrmacht had saved German military honor by abandoning German political unity. They had preserved their institutional reputation by destroying their institutional brothers. They had won the peace by losing their souls. And the SS veterans who survived would never forget who had betrayed them. 1973. A small apartment in Munich. An elderly man sits across from a tape recorder, knowing he has perhaps months to live. General Hans Speidel, former Wehrmacht Chief of Staff to Erwin Rommel, is finally ready to tell the truth. Not the sanitized version he'd given Allied investigators. Not the heroic narrative he'd maintained for 30 years. The complete, unvarnished truth about what Wehrmacht officers really thought during the war. The tapes were never intended for public release. They were oral history interviews conducted by German military historians, trying to understand what had really happened between Wehrmacht and SS forces. What they captured was more explosive than any battlefield recording. Speidel's first admission changed everything. We hated them more than we hated the Allies. That's the truth historians don't want to write. We spent more energy fighting the SS than fighting the enemy. By 1944, some of us were hoping the Allies would win, just to be rid of Himmler and his black uniformed fanatics. The revelation was devastating. Wehrmacht officers hadn't just disliked SS interference, they had actively wanted Germany to lose the war, if it meant destroying the SS. Military professionals had chosen foreign victory over domestic political control. But Speidel wasn't finished. His voice, weakened by age and illness, carried the weight of 30 years of suppressed guilt. Maybe if we'd stopped them earlier, maybe if we'd fought them harder in the beginning instead of trying to work around them, maybe millions of people would still be alive. We knew what they were doing. We documented it. We complained about it. But we didn't stop it. And that makes us complicit in everything that followed. The confession tapes revealed that Wehrmacht officers had been far more aware of SS atrocities than they'd admitted after the war. They had detailed knowledge of concentration camps, mass executions, and racial extermination programs. Their post-war claims of ignorance had been carefully constructed lies, designed to avoid prosecution. General Gotthard Heinrici, commander of Army Group Vistula during the final months of the war, was even more explicit in his 1975 interview. We knew about the death camps. We knew about the mobile killing units. We knew about the medical experiments. Wehrmacht logistics provided transportation for some of these operations. Wehrmacht guards provided security for some of these facilities. We weren't innocent bystanders. We were reluctant participants. But the most shocking revelations concerned Wehrmacht planning for post-war Germany. The tapes revealed that as early as 1943, Wehrmacht officers were planning for a Germany without the SS. Not just military planning, political planning. Colonel General Franz Halder described conversations that took place in Wehrmacht headquarters during 1943. We were already discussing how to rebuild German military institutions after the war, how to separate ourselves from SS contamination, how to preserve military traditions while abandoning Nazi ideology. We knew Germany was going to lose. We wanted to make sure the Wehrmacht survived that loss while the SS didn't. The tapes revealed that Wehrmacht cooperation with Allied prosecutors hadn't been spontaneous post-war decision. It had been planned strategy developed during the final years of the war. Wehrmacht officers had deliberately created documentation that would incriminate the SS while exonerating the traditional military. General Walter Warlimont, former deputy chief of Wehrmacht operations staff, was explicit about this strategy. We maintained separate records of SS activities, specifically to use as evidence after the war. We knew there would be war crimes trials. We knew the victors would demand accountability. We made sure that accountability would fall on the SS rather than the Wehrmacht. It was institutional survival, not justice. But the most devastating admissions concerned Wehrmacht participation in war crimes. The clean Wehrmacht myth that had dominated post-war narratives was systematically destroyed by the veterans' own testimony. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, in a 1974 interview recorded just months before his death, made admissions that would have hanged him at Nuremberg. Wehrmacht units participated in anti-partisan operations that deliberately targeted civilians. Wehrmacht logistics supported SS extermination activities. Wehrmacht commanders signed orders that violated international law. We weren't as bad as the SS, but we weren't clean either. We just had better public relations after the war. The psychological toll of these admissions was evident in every recording. These men had spent 30 years constructing a narrative of Wehrmacht honor and SS corruption. Now, facing death, they were destroying that narrative with their own words. General Heinz Guderian's final interview, recorded in 1954, just weeks before his death, captured the moral exhaustion of Wehrmacht veterans. We tell ourselves we were soldiers following orders. We tell ourselves we were different from the SS. We tell ourselves we preserved German military honor. But late at night, when the propaganda stops and the justifications end, we know the truth. We served evil. We enabled evil. And millions died because we chose institutional survival over moral courage. The most prophetic warning came from General Ludwig Beck's final recording, made in 1944 just before his execution following the July 20th plot. Never let politicians control your military. Never. The moment political ideology becomes more important than military competence, you've lost your army and your honor. The SS represents the complete corruption of military values by political fanaticism. If Germany survives this war, make sure nothing like the SS ever exists again. Beck's warning proved prophetic. The post-war German military was deliberately structured to prevent political control over military operations. Civilian oversight existed, but political commissars and ideological units were permanently banned. The SS model was rejected completely. But the confession tapes also revealed the psychological cost of Wehrmacht resistance to the SS. Many officers describe decades of nightmares, guilt, and depression. They had preserved their institutional honor by sacrificing their personal honor. They had saved German military tradition by abandoning German political loyalty. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg's brother, Berthold, described the psychological aftermath in a 1972 interview. "We spent the war fighting two enemies, the Allies and the SS. We spent the peace fighting one enemy, our own consciences. Some battles you win by losing. Some victories destroy you more completely than any defeat." The final tape was recorded in 1978 by General Hans Speidel, the same officer who had made the first confession. His final words summarized the tragedy of the Wehrmacht-SS conflict. "We thought we were saving German military honor by fighting the SS. Instead, we destroyed German unity by fighting each other. We thought we were preserving military tradition by resisting political control. Instead, we enabled political extremism by failing to stop it early. We thought we were soldiers serving Germany. Instead, we were Germans destroying Germany." The confession tapes were sealed for decades. Too explosive for immediate release. Too damaging to carefully constructed post-war narratives. But they were preserved, waiting for historians brave enough to challenge comfortable myths with uncomfortable truths. When portions were finally released in the 1990s, they revolutionized understanding of the Wehrmacht-SS relationship. The clean Wehrmacht myth was shattered. The SS-only guilt narrative was complicated. The simple story of German military unity was replaced by the complex reality of German military civil war. But the most important revelation was the warning these dying veterans left for future generations. Political fanaticism destroys military effectiveness. Competing military organizations destroy national unity. And soldiers who serve evil systems become evil soldiers, regardless of their personal honor or institutional traditions. The confession tapes had revealed the final truth. The Wehrmacht and SS hadn't been destroyed by enemy action. They had been destroyed by their own hatred for each other. November 11th, 1919. Exactly 100 years after the end of World War I. A nursing home in Bavaria. Friedrich Weber, 99 years old, is the last living witness to the Wehrmacht-SS conflicts of World War II. He served as a Wehrmacht lieutenant from 1941 to 1945. He witnessed the internal war that tore Nazi Germany apart. And now, facing his final days, he's ready to tell the complete truth. The interview was conducted by historians from the German military archive. They expected routine testimony about battlefield experiences. Instead, they received a deathbed confession that challenged everything historians thought they knew about Wehrmacht-SS relations. Weber's opening words were a bombshell. "We weren't the clean army. That's a lie we told ourselves and the world for 70 years. But next to the SS, we looked like saints. And that comparison became our salvation and our damnation." At 99, Weber had outlived almost everyone who could contradict his testimony. He was free to speak truths that previous generations of Wehrmacht veterans had taken to their graves. And those truths were devastating. We all served evil, Weber continued, his voice barely above a whisper but every word clear. The only difference was how much we enjoyed it. The SS enjoyed it. We endured it. But enduring evil and serving evil, in the end, what's the difference? Weber had been present at some of the most significant Wehrmacht SS confrontations of the war. As a young lieutenant in Army Group Center, he witnessed the breakdown of cooperation on the Eastern Front. His testimony provided first-hand confirmation of incidents that historians had only suspected. He described a scene from July 1943 that captured the complete breakdown of Wehrmacht-SS relations. SS unit had captured about 50 Soviet prisoners. Their commander ordered immediate execution, said they didn't have resources to guard prisoners. Our Wehrmacht colonel refused to participate, said it violated military law and German honor. SS commander called him a traitor. Our colonel called the SS commander a murderer. They nearly drew pistols on each other. 2 German officers ready to kill each other over Soviet prisoners. But Weber's most shocking revelation concerned Wehrmacht complicity in SS crimes. The clean Wehrmacht myth had been officially discredited by historians in the 1990s. But Weber provided personal testimony that went beyond academic analysis. We knew about the death camps, he said, staring directly at the camera. Not rumors, not suspicions. We knew. Wehrmacht trains transported prisoners. Wehrmacht guards provided security. Wehrmacht logistics supplied materials. We weren't bystanders. We were participants who told ourselves we had no choice. Weber's testimony revealed the psychological mechanisms Wehrmacht officers used to justify their participation in Nazi crimes. They convinced themselves they were moderating SS extremism by participating in it. They believed their presence made terrible situations slightly less terrible. We told ourselves we were preventing worse atrocities by cooperating with lesser ones, Weber explained. Wehrmacht officer supervising a prisoner transport could ensure some prisoners survived. Wehrmacht guard at a facility could prevent some beatings. Wehrmacht logistics officer could delay some shipments. We convinced ourselves that limited cooperation was actually resistance. But Weber's harshest judgment was reserved for Wehrmacht leadership's post-war strategy. The systematic effort to blame everything on the SS while portraying the Wehrmacht as honorable soldiers. Weber had been young enough during the war to observe without participating in post-war planning. His perspective was devastating. Our generals sold out the SS to save themselves, he said with obvious disgust. They created this myth of SS criminality and Wehrmacht honor. They provided evidence against SS officers while hiding evidence against Wehrmacht officers. They made deals with Allied prosecutors. They betrayed their former allies to protect their former enemies. Weber described conversations he'd overheard in prisoner-of-war camps where Wehrmacht officers planned their post-war testimony. Colonel told us exactly what to say. How to blame everything on SS, political interference. How to portray ourselves as professional soldiers forced to cooperate with fanatics. How to emphasize our resistance to SS methods while minimizing our participation in SS crimes. It was coordinated perjury disguised as historical testimony. But Weber's most damning revelation concerned Wehrmacht officers' true feelings about Germany's defeat. Previous testimony had suggested some officers hoped the Allies would win to eliminate the SS. Weber confirmed this was widespread among Wehrmacht leadership. By 1944, most Wehrmacht officers wanted Germany to lose, he stated flatly. Not because they supported the Allies, because they hated the SS more than they loved Germany. They preferred foreign occupation to SS domination. They chose enemy victory over domestic political control. Weber's testimony revealed the complete moral bankruptcy that had infected German military leadership by the war's end. Professional soldiers had become so focused on institutional survival that they abandoned national loyalty. Military honor had become more important than national honor. Defeating domestic enemies had become more important than defeating foreign enemies. The psychological cost of this choice haunted Wehrmacht veterans for decades. Weber described the guilt that consumed former Wehrmacht officers. We spent 30 years justifying our choices, telling ourselves we saved German military tradition, telling ourselves we preserved institutional honor. But deep down, we knew the truth. We had chosen personal survival over national survival. We had chosen institutional interests over German interests. We had betrayed everything we claimed to serve. Weber's final judgments were the harshest of all. After 70 years of reflection, he had concluded that both Wehrmacht and SS had betrayed Germany in different ways. The SS betrayed Germany by turning it into a criminal state. The Wehrmacht betrayed Germany by refusing to stop them. The SS destroyed German honor through action. The Wehrmacht destroyed German honor through inaction. Both organizations served their own interests while claiming to serve Germany. But Weber's most important message was directed toward future generations. His warning about the dangers of military-political conflict. Never let your military split into competing organizations. Never let politicians create parallel military forces. Never let institutional rivalry become more important than national unity. When soldiers spend more energy fighting each other than fighting enemies, the nation is already defeated. Weber's final words provided the definitive judgment on Wehrmacht-SS relations. History will judge us all, both Wehrmacht and SS, both organizations that claim to serve Germany while destroying it. But history should know one thing above all else. We were never brothers. We were never allies. We were enemies from the beginning. And in the end, our hatred for each other destroyed us both. Weber died 3 weeks after giving this testimony. With his death, the last living witness to Wehrmacht-SS conflicts was gone. His final interview became the definitive primary source for understanding the internal war that consumed Nazi Germany. But Weber's testimony also raised uncomfortable questions for modern militaries. What happens when professional soldiers serve evil regimes? How do institutional loyalties conflict with moral obligations? When does resistance become complicity? When does institutional survival justify national betrayal? Weber had provided answers that no one wanted to hear. professional military organizations could become as corrupt as political organizations. Institutional honor could become a justification for individual dishonor. Military traditions could enable rather than prevent atrocities. And soldiers who served evil systems became evil soldiers, regardless of their personal beliefs or professional competence. The last survivor's final message was a warning. Military institutions are not inherently moral. Professional competence is not the same as ethical behavior. And institutional loyalty can become a greater threat to national values than institutional disloyalty. Weber's deathbed confession had destroyed the final myths about Wehrmacht-SS relations. Both organizations had served evil. Both had betrayed Germany. Both had chosen institutional survival over moral courage. And both had been destroyed by their hatred for each other rather than their service to their country. The last witness was gone. The final truth had been told. And the warning had been delivered to future generations. Never again. March 15th, 2021. The German Federal Archive in Freiburg releases its final batch of classified World War II documents. 76 years after the war ended, the last secrets are finally revealed. Buried in routine administrative files, historians discover something extraordinary. A document that changes everything we thought we knew about how World War II ended. A document that proves Wehrmacht and SS hatred went far beyond rivalry or competition. It was a plan for civil war. The document, marked Wehrmacht Command Staff Only, Destroy After Reading, was dated March 10th, 1945, just weeks before Germany's surrender. It outlined Wehrmacht plans to surrender separately from SS forces. Not just military surrender, political separation. The plan was breathtaking in its scope. Wehrmacht forces would cease all cooperation with SS units. They would establish separate communication channels with Allied forces. They would offer intelligence about SS positions and movements. Most shocking of all, they would actively fight SS forces that refused to surrender. General Alfred Jodl, Wehrmacht Chief of Operations Staff, had signed the document. His handwritten notes in the margins revealed the depth of Wehrmacht desperation. SS political control has made continued resistance impossible. Wehrmacht forces cannot effectively fight external enemies while fighting internal enemies. Separation from SS, command structure necessary for military effectiveness and post-war rehabilitation. The plan included detailed maps showing how Germany would be divided. Wehrmacht-controlled territories in the west and south. SS-controlled territories in the east and north. Two different German states surrendering to different Allied forces under different terms. It was a recipe for civil war in the heart of Europe. But the most explosive revelation was how close this plan came to implementation. Wehrmacht commanders had already begun withdrawing their forces from SS-controlled areas. Supply lines were being redirected. Communication networks were being separated. Intelligence was being compartmentalized. By April 15th, 1945, Wehrmacht and SS forces were operating as completely separate armies. They shared no intelligence. They coordinated no operations. They received orders from different command structures. Germany had effectively split into two different military organizations, fighting two different wars. Only Hitler's suicide prevented the plan's full implementation. With no central authority to maintain even the pretense of unity, Wehrmacht commanders accelerated their separate surrender negotiations. Some Wehrmacht units had already stopped fighting 3 days before Germany's official surrender. SS units, meanwhile, continued fighting for another week. Not against Allied forces, against Wehrmacht units trying to surrender. The final battles of World War II in Europe were fought between German forces wearing the same uniforms but serving completely different causes. The classified document proved what historians had only suspected. Wehrmacht and SS hatred had become so complete that they were willing to split Germany rather than surrender together. Military rivalry had escalated into political separation. Institutional competition had become national dissolution. But the document also revealed something else. A handwritten addendum by Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, signed just hours before his capture. They weren't fighting the same war. They weren't serving the same cause. They were enemies wearing the same flag. History should record that Germany was destroyed not by Allied armies, but by German armies that hated each other more than they loved their country. Keitel's words provided the definitive judgment on Wehrmacht-SS relations. But they weren't the final word. That came from an unexpected source. A cassette tape discovered in 1997 among the personal effects of General Hasso von Manteuffel. Recorded in 1987, just months before his death. His final thoughts on the war that had consumed his generation. The recording quality is poor. The voice is weak with age. But the words are crystal clear. People ask if we were Nazis. Some were, some weren't. But I'll tell you what we all were. We were soldiers who despised the SS more than any enemy we ever faced. More than the British. More than the Americans. More than the Russians. And that hatred, that's what really destroyed the Third Reich. Manteuffel's voice grows stronger as he continues. The Allies didn't defeat Germany. Germany defeated itself. We spent more energy fighting each other than fighting our enemies. We destroyed German unity from within while claiming to defend it from without. We were our own worst enemy, and we were too proud to admit it until it was too late. The tape continues for another minute. Background noise. Heavy breathing. Then Manteuffel's final words, barely audible. We should have been brothers. Instead, we became executioners. Each side convinced the other was Germany's greatest threat. Both sides were right. The recording ends there. No final summary. No dramatic conclusion. Just the truth, spoken by a dying general who had witnessed the complete breakdown of German military unity. The secret they took to their graves was finally revealed. Wehrmacht and SS hadn't just disagreed about military tactics or political objectives. They had hated each other so completely that they were willing to destroy Germany rather than share control of it. Hitler had created two armies to serve one purpose. Instead, he created one nation, served by two enemies. The Wehrmacht and SS had spent 6 years fighting the world while fighting each other. And in the end, their internal war had proven more destructive than any external threat. The classified document from 2021 and the recording from 1987 provided the final pieces of a puzzle that had taken historians 76 years to solve. The Third Reich hadn't been destroyed by Allied victory. It had been destroyed by German hatred. Wehrmacht, hatred for the SS. SS, hatred for the Wehrmacht. Mutual destruction disguised as mutual service. And now you know the secret they tried to take to their graves. The secret that changed everything. The secret that proves sometimes the greatest enemy is the one wearing your uniform.